Our first question for tonight goes, Dear Venerable Ajahn Kalyano, I know you spent a number of years nursing and attending to Venerable Ajahn Chah, and I have no doubt that you had and still have a very close disciple-teacher relationship with him. What I would like to know is how that was achieved, since you met him when he wasn't speaking anymore and his activities were very limited already. Please describe your journey in gaining faith and directions from a teacher under those circumstances. Someone with no wisdom or merit would have seen that situation as a lost cause, but you didn't. Thank you for having gone through that journey and for helping us through ours.
Well, I'm not sure anyone would see it as a lost cause, going to live with an enlightened teacher, even if they're very ill. It's still a very rare opportunity. Also, Ajahn Chah is not, you kind of see Ajahn Chah not only through his own being, his own person, but also through his Sangha. So he had a flourishing monastery with many monks and nuns with experience there, and then many branch monasteries around Thailand and now around the world. So sometimes they say that you see Ajahn Chah or can know Ajahn Chah through his Sangha as well. We love to hear the stories of Ajahn Chah, different things that he said and different incidents and ways that he taught people, because they're often very helpful. Ajahn Chah also had a presence that perhaps that is the part that is more specific, personal to Ajahn Chah. So in his presence, most people who meditated, I would say, could sense there's some very good energy there, a very peaceful mind, a certain, obviously a good feeling, pleasant feeling, gives you a certain piti and sukha, but also he seemed to express that, it's hard to say in words, but if you stay with someone 24 hours a day, and sometimes I did, he seemed to be very mindful, very present. Certainly when I first started looking after him, even though he wasn't speaking, he could be, he'd still respond to you. He would move his arms, he'd move his eyes. It was like he was very, in touch with what was going on around him. So it wasn't like he was in a state, he wasn't in a coma or unconscious or asleep. He actually slept very little, as far as I can observe, even when he was ill. So one was always aware of his presence. That's my experience, personal experience. Very peaceful presence and energizing presence. Partly the energy comes from just you have faith in a teacher, you know how the teacher's lived, you've heard talks, heard stories of the teacher's own practice. So when you're with that teacher that you have faith, confidence in, you sort of tend to try harder in your practice, certainly when you're new to the practice. So part of it is just how you perceive the teacher, but part of it is also how the teacher is. As I said, there's a very good energy, good atmosphere around him. And then of course that's also happening for other people as well, picking up on that, aware of that. So generally the atmosphere and the behavior of people around Ajahn Chah was very, you'd see the best of people. Perhaps more mindful than normal, more careful, very respectful, very dedicated to looking after him and just practicing the Dhamma and the Vinaya around him. So there's a whole range of different aspects, or you could say advantages, to being around Ajahn Chah even though he was ill. So I found it very helpful for my practice. And if you're with a teacher, even though he's not teaching, people around him will teach and talk about him, and people would ask questions and people would discuss Ajahn Chah's practice and teachings in that place, in that situation as well. So it wasn't like it was completely silent and nothing was happening. Being around Ajahn Chah, there was a lot of good things happening around him that were obviously stimulated by his presence, and because he was a teacher with a large sangha of people and a large lay community who looked to him as their teacher. So many good things would be happening around him that were also inspiring, helpful, and you'd learn a lot in different situations. So it wasn't my relationship with Ajahn Chah wasn't so much based on discussion, because he didn't discuss, but you'd still pick up on things. I think I've talked about it before, and some other monks have talked about it before as well. Like he would use his ability to control his coughing, maybe. He would cough a lot. He had bronchitis, pneumonia, a lot of phlegm in his lungs, so he would cough a lot. And he always seemed to be coughing at times when people were not that mindful. Perhaps we read too much into this as well. I know, I'm aware of that. But several times I was with Ajahn Chah, and maybe two monks would be engaging in conversation a little too much, either excitedly talking about something, enjoying their conversation perhaps, or occasionally even having some kind of little argument. And Ajahn Chah would start coughing, seemingly uncontrollably, but the timing would be perfect to interrupt the conversation of the two monks. And the thing was that when Ajahn Chah started coughing, there was always a danger he could fall out of bed, because he did sometimes cough quite violently. There's a danger he could fall out of his bed, or something could happen, he could get hurt or something. So whenever he started coughing, you rushed to him or moved very quickly to get to him. Later on, we'd also have to use a suction to suck out phlegm from his throat. But in the beginning, when we didn't have a suction machine, you'd always have to go and check on him and be with him when he was coughing. So it forced you to drop whatever else you were doing. So it seemed to happen at these fortuitous moments, like if people were too wild in their conversations or having a little argument or something and the cough happened, then they'd have to stop. Occasionally even meditating next to him, which I did a lot of, many hours of sitting meditation next to Ajahn Chah. And often late at night, I used to meditate next to him. I used to do the night shift quite often. So I'd be there meditating like 1 a.m. So sometimes you start to fall asleep. And strangely enough, he would start coughing. As you start becoming drowsy, he might cough and wake you up. Again, you could say happy coincidence, so who really knows? But it seemed to be that he was as sharp as ever, and using the ability just to cough, could be a very small cough or a very big cough, just to make people more mindful around him. Things like that. And certainly when I used to massage him, every day we used to massage him at least twice a day and do physiotherapy with him, different exercises. And he'd pull against you, he'd have his arm, you'd be massaging his arm, and you pull his arm up, he might pull it down, or you pull his arm down, he'd pull it up. He'd pull against you to show that he could still use his muscles, and he wasn't necessarily teaching anything much other than showing you that he's still there. So then you realize, he's doing that, so then he's doing other things. He'd also use, it would seem he used the feeding process, which he obviously relied on the monks, the attendant monks, to feed him. he seemed to use that sometimes as a teaching method. So sometimes he didn't want to eat, and which could cause a bit of stress for the monk feeding him, who was in charge of feeding him, because you feel obliged, the monk would feel obliged to feed Ajahn Chah. You don't want him to starve. But Ajahn Chah wouldn't cooperate because he had problems swallowing, and you had to massage his muscles there, try and help him to eat. So if he wasn't helping you, he wasn't swallowing or he wasn't opening his mouth, then the monk just has to wait. And then if you wait long enough, maybe the doubt comes up, why isn't he eating today? Is it something I've done? This didn't actually happen to me, but it happened to monks I was with, and I could see they got very stressed by it. And there was actually one very emotional, difficult time when Ajahn Chah refused to eat a whole meal, and the monk who was trying to offer the meal, help him eat, was getting so stressed he actually had to leave the whole nursing kuti where we were, and he just left his duty of looking after Ajahn Chah. He just felt so, perhaps it was a mixture of stress, perhaps he was not so comfortable within himself, perhaps he was embarrassed. There was a few different things going on, and it seemed like maybe Ajahn Chah was giving him a very important teaching, even though not a word was said. But this monk got the teaching, so he just said, I can't feed Ajahn Chah today, it's not working, and he left the vicinity, and he actually left the monastery very quickly. He was so upset and so emotional. So sometimes there were things like that would happen, and you could perhaps read more into it than you should, but at the same time, if you're with him many days, many months, years, you realize, well, maybe there is something going on here. Ajahn Chah wasn't completely unaware of people's state of mind or what the situation was. So perhaps a monk was being stubborn in his own practice, and then Ajahn Chah was being stubborn back to him to sort of wake him up a bit, or something like that. There's a few other incidents I can remember, but I'm not sure I can relate to them all effectively at the moment. Is there anything else? No, I think I'll leave it there. But needless to say, it was a great honor for me to look after Ajahn Chah for many months of my life. I learned a lot. I'm very grateful, appreciative that I had that chance. I never thought he was, I was helping him. I always thought this is just my chance to serve the teacher and learn whatever I could from the experience. And it was very good, just practically speaking, learning how to nurse someone, learning how to be with someone who's very sick, elderly. There's a lot of life in that. You're learning about life. And of course, when it's a teacher who is a very wise, compassionate teacher, you're in the right mode, the right frame of mind to learn. So I found it a very valuable time in my meditation. I put a lot of effort into my meditation. Obviously, you're constantly being interrupted because you had to do things for Ajahn Chah, but you accepted that. And there would be times when you could meditate for longer periods, say when he was resting or nothing was happening. And so often my meditation would get very good, in the sense, very energetic, my mind would become very bright. And, I learned to let go of a lot of things being around Ajahn Chah, my own personal stuff. So I was very grateful to have that chance.
Sadhu Nungpo. Another question. Are nirmana kaya real? Or do higher level bodhisattvas still have to come down and do the heavy lifting, so to speak. If they are real, how did the Friendly One and Earth Store Bodhisattva manifest this miraculous ability? On an abhidhammic level, how does it work? Is it a totally separate citta with its own khandhas? One can't help but imagine a special room in the inner court of Tusita Heaven with a bunch of video monitors and the Friendly One whispering wholesome intentions into a microphone. They say the old monk from Wat Suan Hin Pa Nang Koi was one such emanation. Thank you.
So where's the question in there? Can you just run it back to the top and let me read it? Not exactly clear what the question is here. But anyway, we believe there are the heaven realms, and the Buddha talked about the different heaven realms, sensual heaven realms and Brahma realms, and then the lower realms, ghost, hell realms, and so on. So in the heaven realms, we say Dusita heaven is usually the heaven realm where bodhisattvas, people who've made aspiration to become a Buddha, get reborn. But they're obviously not there all the time. Sometimes they may be reborn again as a human. As we know, you can read the Jataka stories of Buddha's past lives, and you know that bodhisattvas get born into different realms over and over again. Particularly the human realm, but sometimes Deva realm, sometimes animal realm. Born in the human realm, Deva realm mainly, I would say. Anyway, born into different realms, come down, go back. But there's this idea that the bodhisattva with such a powerful, pure mind up in Dusita heaven is they can also split their mind, in the sense their mind is so powerful they can make an adhitthana to be reborn while they're still up in the heaven realm, but there's somebody down in the earth realm, a human being is born, and the bodhisattva is as if with them, or that person is an emanation of the bodhisattva. They say this is possible. So if you don't have personal experience of it, I would say just keep an open mind that maybe these things are possible, maybe not. Rather than just dismissing it as, this doesn't fit with the Theravada Buddhist text, because it probably doesn't. But it may fit with actual people's experience, people who can be trusted, teachers and meditators who've got their personal experience. So there's some aspects of Buddhism a bit like that. There's a little bit of sometimes a contradiction between what people have known and experienced through their own practice and the texts. On one level it seems like a contradiction, but actually I would say it's not really a contradiction, because we're all practicing to develop insight into the Four Noble Truths and attain Nibbana. How we get there depends, doesn't it? And so bodhisattvas often are beings who have been around a long time. They develop a lot of good qualities, a lot of barami. So there's samadhi barami, there's wisdom barami, there's compassion or metta barami. These are all very well developed. So how they display that can be, sometimes even would seem to be beyond words to describe. And just as a Buddha, one who actually becomes a Buddha, we call a Buddha a sapanyu. Buddha can turn the Buddha's mind to know anything that they wish to. The Buddha once said, I can know anything that needs to be known in this world or could be known. But I focus on the Four Noble Truths and teaching that, because you don't need to know everything in the universe in order to penetrate the Four Noble Truths. Nevertheless, the Buddha has such an amazing mind, he can know anything he turns to. So a bodhisattva would have that similar quality, maybe not quite on the level of a Buddha, but very similar, I would have thought. So they can have some amazing qualities to know things and influence things in different ways, and particularly influence people, maybe help people. So I would say it's all possible. Everything is possible. Many different things are possible. What you might call a miraculous ability. It's still an ability based on training of the mind, developing a barami. The 10 baramitas develop very well. But to the person who's not practiced very much or doesn't understand the mind that much, it seems like a miracle. Just there's so many things to, somebody can have a premonition of the future or know somebody else's mind. These things are possible, but for someone who hasn't practiced to that level, they're always going to think, oh, this is really amazing. How can it be? And they'll probably doubt. And it's probably correct to doubt, isn't it? If there's something happening or you hear of something, you don't know how it works, how it happens, well, it's correct to have a doubt, but I would just keep an open mind. And I've seen that on a few occasions where, somebody doubts about a bodhisattva or doubts about a monk or a nun who practices very well, but doubts about their ability, thinks it's all just fake. And you kind of see how they might be actually limiting their own practice and their own ability to progress in the practice because they believe their own conceited views or personal views too strongly. Again, clinging too tightly to their own view to the point where they don't allow the space in their mind for any other possibilities. So then they're kind of cutting themselves off. And that doesn't mean to say if you believe there can be bodhisattvas in heaven realm, or even bodhisattvas can come down and be born and go back up to the heaven realm, doesn't mean to say you have to believe that either. But I would just recommend keeping an open mind, and maybe these things are true, maybe not, until you have your own experience. And some things are very difficult to explain in words.
Sadhu Lumpo. Next question, Ajahn. Recently, there are a lot of rumors online about a possible coming war from a neighboring big country. I wonder what's the best way to face and mentally prepare for this threat. Sadhu.
Use it to your advantage. It is reminding you of the uncertainty of life, so we must practice the Dhamma all the more. Practice more dana, more sila, more bhavana, get enlightened all the quicker, because you don't know how long the world will be a peaceful, safe place to practice. You don't know how long the conditions you have to practice now will last. Trouble is, while conditions are good, we become complacent and we stop practicing. We become lazy, indulgent, distracted, whatever. So, who knows what the world will bring us in the next year or 10 years or 20 years. Who knows whether there'll be a war or not. We don't know, but the important thing is, do you know your mind today? Are you looking after your mind? Are you cultivating wholesome dhammas, trying to abandon unwholesome dhammas? Are you cultivating the Buddhist path or not today? That's the most important thing. And if you ever meet people who are warlike or angry enough to start a war, we'll try to be very patient with them and practice compassion towards them and encourage them to calm down a little bit and tell them war is not a good thing. But I'm joking here. If it does happen, you're not going to be able to stop it. So just let them get on with it and come and stay in the forests and the mountains. Maybe you'll survive more. I don't know. We used to joke, there were many years ago, about 20 years ago, there was news that a certain country had developed intercontinental ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads and they could hit Australia. And then we were thinking, well, we're up in the mountains of the Yarra Ranges. Perhaps the intercontinental ballistic missile will be aimed at the cities. They're unlikely to aim at the national park in the Yarra Ranges. There's not a lot of benefit to them, I think. And these missiles cost a lot of money. So, if you come and stay in the monastery, we'll probably be okay. I don't think the missiles will hit us. Of course, we just don't know what will happen in the world. I would just hurry up and practice a lot while you got the chance.
Sadhu. Next question. Hi Luang Por. I'm just curious, are there devas around us? Thank you, Luang Por.
Potentially. Devas are notorious, they don't like human realm very much because it's kind of smelly and dirty. And humans are often thinking evil thoughts and doing evil things, like starting wars. So there are devas around, but what they tend to do is come down or come closer to humans when there's a reason, and it tends to be humans who are practicing goodness in one way or another, whether they're Buddhist or not. That's what devas will tend to come and give their anumodana for, if people are doing kind, good things. If people are suffering but they have a good heart, sometimes devas come to encourage them and help them. When people are doing good, they come to encourage them. If a monk or a nun is meditating, developing samadhi, they'll come to encourage them. Devas tend to encourage people to do good and give their anumodana and their appreciation for that. So obviously monasteries are places where you might expect devas to come. But there's devas and devas, aren't there? There's many levels of these heaven realms. So the Chatu Maharajika realm is closer to the human realm. So you might get devas associated with physical places and objects like trees and rocks and mountains and ponds and lakes. Whereas other devas, like we were talking about earlier, the Dusita heaven realm is, as it were, further away. So they're not that close to the human realm, but they can still influence the human realm or come to the human realm and then go back again, would be the most likely thing. They temporarily visit. So tend to be around people who are doing good, particularly people meditating a lot, who have a well-developed sense of hiriyottapa, sense of shame, fear of wrongdoing. People who are doing a lot of good, they'll try to support that. But where there's a lot of not very good things happening, well, devas will tend to shy away, just as we would. We don't want to go to a war zone or place where people are doing horrible things. You might hear about it, but you don't want to go there, do you? Because you shy away from that. That's the mind of a deva.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next question. Sadhu Ajahn, for your helping Ajahn Chah, can one achieve Nibbana in this life or only after death?
You can achieve it this life. After death, if you've achieved, you have to achieve it in whatever life you're in order to experience it after death. If you haven't achieved it this life, then hopefully you can achieve it next life. One thing people say, which is puzzling, they say, "Oh, I'm not ready for practicing for Nibbana." Maybe they think it's too hard, too high, too difficult. So I can't practice this life. I've got too much karma, too many attachments, too many problems. So I think Nibbana is a good thing and I would like to attain Nibbana, but I'm not ready for it, I'm not ready to practice for it. So they don't practice. But if you think about karma, cause and result, if you're not practicing for Nibbana this life, why would you practice for Nibbana next life? Because this life you're not. It's not like it's going to kind of suddenly come out of nowhere. You're already laying the grounds, the causes, for you not to practice next life. So I don't think it's a good idea to think like that. Sure, Nibbana might seem difficult and we all have our karma and our problems, but just work through them. Just set your goal on Nibbana and keep going. That would be my suggestion. And if you haven't finished when you die, well, hopefully you'll get the good causes and conditions to continue next life. But if you set the whole thing aside, I'd say that's kind of like treading on risky ground and you don't know what's going to happen next because you aren't laying the causes for good things to happen in this life. That's a little aside there.
Saralumbo. Another question. Dear Ajahn, you mentioned in the talk that we don't take with us our likes and dislikes from one life to another. I thought that we carried our tendencies of what we have liked and disliked in previous lives with us as part of our previous karma to the next life. Could you please clarify or explain?
Well, we're constantly receiving the fruits of our karma from day to day, moment to moment. The fruits of our past attachments and cravings, likes and dislikes, bring their fruit back. So we are constantly experiencing pleasant and unpleasant feeling. But you feel pleasure and then it passes away. It kind of dies right there. It's not like that pleasure is carried on with you. It stops. Pain also stops. That was the point I was making. But the causes and conditions to experience pleasure and pain again, to fall into liking and disliking again, are right there. As long as your mind is still affected by ignorance, greed, anger, delusion, then of course you'll keep falling into craving and attachment over and over again. And that will go on through this life and then into the next life. But what we're experiencing from moment to moment is the fruits of our past karma. So it will come up, how you feel, how your body is right now, the mental state, the thoughts that are coming up, how you feel. This is all past karma manifesting. And it arises and ceases. But what happens next? Once you're stimulated by your pleasant experience or your unpleasant experience, what you do next is your fresh new karma. And that you're constantly making new karma through your life.
Saralumbo. Are there any more questions from anyone? That's all the questions, Lumpo.
Okay, nice to talk to you tonight. Wish you all well with your Dhamma practice and should be able to talk to you again next week, I think.